Mr. President.
Senator from North Dakota.
Mr. President, I join my colleagues today to recognize that the environment is critically important, but I also know that in the past years, many times state regulators—
May I, the senator, for just one moment, for an administrative thing, I want to yield the remainder of my post-cloture debate time to Senator Carper. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to the senator from the Dakotas.
Thank you, Mr. President. One of the true issues is getting back to the promise of the Clean Air and Clean Water Act and make sure that states enjoy primacy. And I think that's a critical component that's not being discussed today as we look at guaranteeing clean water, clean air, but also making sure that those closest to those issues have the ability to have the input that was anticipated by by almost every environmental statute. And so I would remind my colleagues that where we focus many times on federal issues and federal appointments, one of the most important things that we can do is focus on the fact that these federal agency heads need to work cooperatively with state organizations. Scott Pruitt, who is a state soon-to-be former Attorney General, understands the state role, and I think that's a critical qualification and important distinction to make. But I didn't come to talk about the appointment of Scott Pruitt. I came to talk about something that we can all agree on. In fact, the President and I agree on this almost, and I think everyone here agrees on this almost unanimously, which is that American jobs matter. Putting Americans back to work in manufacturing is one of the most critical things that we can do here in the Senate. Making sure that our people have an opportunity to succeed, have an opportunity to participate, have an opportunity to produce goods and services which can be exported, which can grow the wealth of our country and grow the economy of our country. Last week, I joined President Trump in a small bipartisan lunch. We had a chance to talk about a variety of issues, and there's very many issues that divide us. But this issue unites us. And I specifically talked with the President about the need to get the Export-Import Bank up and running. I also talked to him about the Export-Import Bank in December and talked about the importance of enabling this institution to function for the American manufacturing worker. And the great news is that President Trump agrees. And informed me that we can, in fact, say he supports the EXIM Bank and that he would be nominating someone soon to serve on the Export-Import Bank. And so I wanted, that led off a rash of discussion among the usual naysayers with the EXIM Bank, mostly driven by ideology, not fact. And so I think it's important to come once again and reiterate the importance of the EXIM Bank. And so I certainly appreciate the President's interest and making American workers a priority. I think that I know he'll be in Boeing in South Carolina on Friday. I don't know if he'll make any announcement about nominating someone to the EXIM Bank. I hope he does. There's been a lot of talk about supporting the economy and boosting American manufacturing jobs. But all that talk falls on deaf ears if we don't take action on the simple issue that we can actually, when we can actually accomplish those goals. And that simple issue is enabling the Export-Import Bank to fully function. For decades, the Export-Import Bank has helped level the playing field for American businesses and American workers. Yet petty politics are enabling one senator to put political ideology before jobs and well-being of thousands of American workers across our country. We worked very, very hard in 2015. We knew that we were going to be challenged to get the EXIM Bank reauthorized. In June of 2015, the Export-Import Bank expired, did not have a charter, was not authorized for the first time in its more than 80-year history. I fought very hard to reauthorize, as did a number of my colleagues, and finally in December of 2015, 6 months later, The bank was given a charter, was given an authorization. And I want to point out something, because I think way too often we think what stops this kind of endeavor is partisan politics. Guess what? Over 70% of the House of Representatives voted for the EXIM Bank. Over 60% of the Senate voted for the EXIM Bank. This is not a partisan issue. There's bipartisan support, but yet there is a narrow group of people who would rather put ideology ahead of American jobs. It is wrong on so many levels. So despite the fact, unfortunately, that the bank finally authorized the EXIM Bank over a year ago with overwhelming support, we do not have a bank that can authorize any credits over $10 million. Why is that? Because it requires a quorum of bank board members to make that decision. We only have 2 out of a 5 board membership. That means we don't have a quorum. So what's been happening is there is $30 billion. Think about that. $30 billion of American exports waiting in the queue, waiting for approval, hoping desperately to get the EXIM Bank up and running so that those exports can receive the credit that they need, receive the guarantees that those exports need, and get people back to work. You know what else has been happening since we haven't had a quorum on the bank? Thousands of American jobs have been transported to places like France and Canada. We're losing thousands of jobs. And so when I hear people say the EXIM Bank is the bank of Boeing or the bank of GE, trust me, I do not bleed for the executives of Boeing. I do not bleed for the executives of GE. They'll do fine. In fact, they know how to get around this problem. They just move those manufacturing jobs to a country that will recognize the exports, that will provide that export credit. That's what's happening. But guess what's happening with the American worker and families across these manufacturing facilities? They're getting pink slips. Why? Because this body refuses to give us a quorum on the EXIM Bank. The president understands this. The president understands how important it is to get these American workers back together. Now, I want you to just think about what $30 billion of exports is worth to American employment. If we use the numbers that extrapolate, because it's hard to know, it's over 170,000 jobs. Think about that. 170,000 jobs waiting in the wings, waiting for us to do the right thing right here. And so when we move forward with the EXIM Bank, I think that we will have a good day, a good bipartisan day, where the President of the United States joins with those of us who care about workers and manufacturing in this country and get the EXIM Bank up and running. I think if we fail to do it, and if we fail to send the signals that the help is coming, that the EXIM Bank is going to be an effective institution that will once again play a role in American manufacturing and will be in that tool chest of trade opportunities, if we don't do it, then they're going to give up all hope and they're going to find some other place to manufacture the products that will allow them to access the credit, that will allow them to sell their products overseas. And so it is critically important. I want to leave with one statistic. The Peterson Institute recently estimated that the United States is losing $50 million in exports for every day the nomination is not confirmed. $50 million of new wealth creation for our country. It is a travesty. Of all the things that I've seen here, the callous things, it sounds so bureaucratic when you talk about the EXIM Bank, but when you pick up the curtain and you look underneath, what it is American jobs and American families and American opportunity and new wealth creation for our country and economic growth for our country. And because some institution that could give you a black mark in a political campaign says we don't like it, it doesn't get done. Shame on us. And thank you to the President for agreeing to help us move the EXIM Bank forward. Thank you to all of my colleagues, 64 in the last Congress, who stood with us to get the EXIM Bank reauthorized, and the over 70% of the House of Representatives on a standalone vote who voted for the EXIM Bank, who know how critically important this is. We can get this job done, and we can stop the migration of these jobs to other countries. So I look forward to hearing more this week and hopefully early next week from the President. I look forward to, as a member of the Banking Committee, pushing for a vote, a hearing and a vote on this nominee. And I look forward to the day that all of these exporters and these American workers can see that this institution can work for them. And that'll be the day that those credits are approved at the EXIM Bank. Thank you so much, Mr. President. I yield the floor.